are in the midst of another NFL week, this time week 9. We are almost at the halfway point of the season, which is both super exciting and kind of sad. It means not that much football left. But given there is still football left and still a fair amount, we are going to do our week 9 pick'ems here in this video. But before we get into the video, I wanted to take a second to ask you to please subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications. Really helps us out. If you're a fan of the NFL, you'll love this channel as we release multiple NFL-related videos every Thursday and Saturday all year long. Now, let's get back to the video. So, looking back at our Week 8 picks, I did all right. I went 10-6. It was the same record as Vegas. I didn't call too many upsets in Week 8. I called the Cardinals to beat the Dolphins, which I got correct, and I called the Buccaneers to beat the Falcons, which I got incorrect. I still think that was the right pick. That was actually the one I was more confident in coming into the week, but hey, you win some, you lose some. I'm still 3 games back of Vegas, but I will tell you ahead of time, I have picked a lot of upsets this week. So let's see if this week is either the week that I fall way too far behind or I catch right back up. So moving into this week's picks, we start with the Patriots visiting the Titans. And this is an absolute puke fest of a football game. 2 of the worst teams in the NFL going head-to-head. I mean, nobody wants to see this game whatsoever. If you are watching this game, you damn well better be a Patriots fan or a Titans fan, because you're not watching it because of fantasy, because there's so many other better games on at the 1 o'clock slot that's going to be better for any fantasy team you could build. You're not watching this because you like good football, because this is not good football. And even if you're a fan of these teams, like, are you sure you want to watch them? Like, are you sure? I feel there's better things you can do with your Sunday afternoon than watch the Patriots visiting the Titans. But we do pick all the games. We do talk about all of them. So let's quickly talk about them. The Patriots are a team that is actually, in my opinion, moving somewhat in the right direction. Their defense still isn't that bad, though they are trading away some assets. Drake May definitely looks watchable as a quarterback. And yes, that is the best compliment I can give, given Jacoby Brissett has not looked watchable as the quarterback for the New England Patriots. I do think Drake May will be a good quarterback in the NFL. I think he's going to improve game after game, year over year. And as the Patriots give him more assets to work with, it should get a bit better. But for now, the Patriots' asset pool is just so dry, so barren, they don't have a very good team. As for the Titans, they've traded away DeAndre Hopkins. Their defense has been good on the season, but they got destroyed by the Detroit Lions this past week when they actually played against, a good offense. And their offense, whether it be Mason Rudolph or Will Levis throwing the football, has not been very good at all. Yes, I know Calvin Ridley had a pretty good game against the Lions, but 1 good game, maybe 2 on the season, does not make a good football club. And I don't even know if Rudolph is going to start again for the Titans. It might again be Will Levis, and that has been a terrible experience. And so, breaking this down, you might be wondering, who am I picking? Well, I'm picking the Patriots, and this is actually an upset pick. The Titans are favored in this game, but I'm actually going with a team that's not even in this game as the reason why I'm picking the Patriots, and that's the Detroit Lions. I am a fan of the Detroit Lions, obviously, but the Lions, their opponents, have lost their following week every time this season, and by pretty significant margins. In fact, the closest margin of defeat was the Dallas Cowboys this last week to the San Francisco 49ers, where they scored 2 touchdowns like right at the end of the game to make it a 6-point game, and they had a bye week in between. No other team was even within 1 possession the week after playing the Lions. And there's a theory that it's because the Lions are so rough and tumble, they just beat you up and it's tough to come back the following week. And if that's true, the Titans played the Lions last week. They did get beat up by the Lions, and so why not take the Patriots to get another win? I mean, they did beat the Jets this past week. Why not? Now we're on to another shitty matchup, and I spent way too long talking about that shitty matchup to go to another one, and so I'm going to try to make this one a little bit quicker. The New Orleans Saints have been absolutely terrible after week 2 of this NFL season. They started off 2-0. A lot of people thought they were great, and they've sucked since. The Carolina Panthers have sucked since the beginning of the season. And yes, Andy Dalton might be back after spraining his thumb in a car accident on the Panthers facility area. I don't even know what the hell happened there. Either way, it's either Bryce Young or Andy Dalton. I don't totally know who it's going to be yet, but we have to remember, when the Saints started off 2-0, one of the teams they beat was the Panthers when they looked like one of the best teams in the league. And so I think they're just going to beat the Panthers again. Yeah, Andy Dalton might make this closer. Yeah, being at home might make this closer. But I still think the Saints are going to pull this off because the Panthers are the Panthers, and that's all we need to say. Saints win. Our next game is the Broncos versus the Ravens, two teams that are pretty good on the season. I think we all expected that out of the Baltimore Ravens, but no one expected that out of the Broncos. And we got to start looking at the Broncos and at Bo Nix as legit. I mean, I literally got mocked last week when I picked up Bo Nix in fantasy. Everyone was laughing at me like, why the hell would you pick up Bo Nix? And what did he go and do? Was one of the best quarterbacks in fantasy last week and is top 10 in quarterback play for fantasy on the season. Like, he's been genuinely good. Yeah, his first couple weeks weren't that great, but since then, he's been more efficient. He doesn't really have that many weapons to work with. I mean, Cortland Sutton is his best receiver, and that's not great as your best. And then other guys he's working with are like Vele, Troy Franklin, Jaleel McLaughlin. Like, it's not a conclave of fantastic receivers, but Bo Nix is still look good, and the defense is incredibly good for the Broncos. On the flip side, the Ravens have a very good offense and an inconsistent defense. I actually think this might be a bit of a shootout of a football game because even though the Broncos defense can hold other teams' offenses in check, I think the Ravens offense is good enough that they will still be able to overcome the Broncos defense. And I do think the Broncos can put up some level of points with Bo Nix, especially with how he's been improving over the course of the season. Now, I'm still going to pick the Baltimore Ravens. They're at home. They're a really good team. But this is not a surefire, lock-it-in, Ravens are winning football game. Remember, the Ravens have lost to the Cleveland Browns and the Las Vegas Raiders on this season. Yeah, there are other losses to the Chiefs, and we know the Chiefs are very good. But they have two bad losses. And I don't think the Broncos would be a bad loss. This is definitely a losable game for the Ravens, but I just don't see this team losing two in a row again. They did lose two in a row to start the season, but I don't think it's going to happen again, and I think the Ravens will find a way to win this game. This is a really good football team. I think the Broncos are up and coming, but they're playing against an established powerhouse, and I'm taking the established powerhouse at home every time. Next up, we have the Las Vegas Raiders going against the 3-5 Cincinnati Bengals, and I did not have the Bengals being 3-5 on my bingo card for the 2024 NFL season. I thought they'd be much improved with Joe Burrow being back and healthy, but, apparently not. I still think the Bengals are the better team in this game, and they're at home, and I'm not going to bury the lead. I'm picking them to win this game. But the Raiders are a team that sometimes comes out, shows up, and actually wins games, and the Bengals are the complete opposite. A team that sometimes doesn't show up and just loses football games. I think the Bengals know this is effectively win now at this point in the season because they maybe have two more losses in the tank before they're out of the playoff picture. I mean, they finished 9-8 last year. For all those who don't remember, they still had a winning record in 2023, but that was not good enough to make the playoffs in 2023. And given the fact that they're only 3 losses shy of where they were last season, this is a team that definitely needs to pick it up in the second half of the season. And I mean, getting a win at home versus the Raiders is a good way to start, but this is must win. I mean, this is playoff football for the Bengals. If they lose this game, I have written them off. They are done. They are not making it to the playoffs. End of story. I know it's still mathematically possible, but when your best possible record is 11-6 and you're going to lose games, every team loses some games. And if you have 8 games where you can't lose, Bengals will be done. So this is must win, and I think they'll pull it off. Next up, we have another AFC contest. The Los Angeles Chargers visiting the Cleveland Browns. And the Chargers are favored in this game primarily because they have looked pretty good on the season. Early on in the season, this team just ran the ball on everybody. And then since about their bye week, they've been throwing on everybody in spite of their lack of receivers. I mean, Quentin Johnston's been missing time. Ladd McConkey missed some games. But they realized they have Justin Herbert, and he can ball out as a quarterback. And the Chargers are definitely a team that is going to be scrappy throughout the season and might sneak into the playoffs in an AFC conference that has been a lot weaker than expected. I had a bunch of teams penciled in to be good in the AFC, including teams like the Jaguars, the Colts, the Cleveland Browns, who they're going against in this game. All of these teams I expected to be very competent football teams, and the truth is, they're not. And so I understand why the Chargers are favored in this game. But on the flip side, while I did just say the Cleveland Browns are not competent, that's a little bit of a false lead. The Cleveland Browns were an incompetent football team, and because of that incompetence, they're not going to be making the playoffs. Let's just get that out of the way. this team is not making the playoffs. But they're still a good team. And without Deshaun Watson and with Jameis Winston, this team looked a lot better last week when they beat the Baltimore Ravens. That's a pretty significant win for the Cleveland Browns. And with the Browns being at home, I actually have them winning this football game. I think Jameis Winston certainly makes this team better. Their defense is still very good. They got David Njoku back. They got Nick Chubb back. They're starting to look more like themselves. Yeah, they did trade away Amari Cooper, and so their offense might not be quite as good as it had the potential to be last year. But I mean, hey, they didn't have Nick Chubb last year, so maybe it is as good. And maybe their defense is still as good. And maybe they do have really good pass rush and really good secondary and some good linebackers, and they're just a good football team. Yeah, they might continue to trade away some guys as we approach the trade deadline, but as of right now, they have not traded away anybody. And they're going to be entering this game with their full store of assets. And at home, with Jameis at quarterback, I think they win this football game. Next up, we have another AFC matchup. AFC East rivals Miami Dolphins visiting the Buffalo Bills. And people might think this is going to be a competitive football game. The Dolphins have Tua back. They did look better last week, even though they did lose to the Cardinals. But hey, that was week 1 of Tua being reintegrated. Imagine what week 2 of Tua being reintegrated will look like. They should absolutely be able to compete with the Buffalo Bills, right? Wrong. The Buffalo Bills are winning this football game. Remember when Tua got injured? That was in week 2. That was a home game versus the Buffalo Bills. And let's be clear, the Bills dominated that game, and they had already dominated that game before Tua got injured. The game was out of hand. The Bills were basically putting in backups at the time that Tua got injured. And now with this game being in Buffalo, no, this ain't a contest. Bills are winning this football game. Let's move on. I'm actually going to put this as my lock of the week. I know that's a little bit of an aggressive lock of the week, but come on. The Bills and Dolphins, we know how these games go. Bills win. And now, after all those AFC opponents, we're going to move back to the NFC with the Dallas Cowboys visiting the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons are favored by Vegas in this game because, they've been pretty good. They are probably going to make the playoffs. They are definitely right now the best team in the NFC South. I don't think they were the best team in the NFC South, but with the Buccaneers losing Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, I think for now we do have to call the Falcons the best team in that division, especially given they will hold the tiebreak within the division because the Falcons won both their games against the Buccaneers on the season. And when talking about the Falcons, you have to say the Falcons have looked pretty good in recent weeks. They've actually been a fairly competent football team. They're playing good. Their running game has started to get going with Bijan Robinson. Their passing game has been quite good. Drake London has been phenomenal. Kyle Pitts has actually been pretty good. And Darnell Mooney is no slouch either. Their defense still leaves something to be desired, but that's what Raheem Morris is there for. That's what he's working on. He is a defensive-minded head coach, and they're going to get that figured out. So, all told, the Falcons are a good football team, and imagine how much better they could be if they didn't pick Michael Penix Jr. at 8th overall. Yeah, we still got to talk about that because, my God, was that fucking dumb. And so, again, I understand them being favored at home versus the Dallas Cowboys, who have looked like one of the most inept football teams in recent memory. Yeah, they're 3-4, which could be a lot worse, but they have been absolutely decimated in multiple of these football games. They had the New Orleans Saints destroy them, and, we've talked about the Saints. They're not that good. They had the Detroit Lions destroy them, and the Lions are very good, but they still lost 47-9 on Jerry Jones' birthday. That was pathetic. And while the 49ers didn't destroy them, the 49ers were up on them pretty big before the Cowboys scored a bunch of touchdowns late. That's the same thing that happened against the Baltimore Ravens. And so realistically, the Cowboys in all 4 games they lost kind of got annihilated. Just in 2 of them, they scored towards the end to make the final scoreline seem somewhat close, even though it wasn't. And so I said it before, I'll say it again. The Falcons are favored in this game. But I'm actually picking the Cowboys. And it's because I think the Cowboys realize this is do or die. This is do or die for Mike McCarthy. He's going to put it all on the line. Dak Prescott knows that people are getting louder and louder wanting his head. Jerry Jones, that people are getting louder and louder wanting him to step down. Yeah, okay, Dak and CD already get paid. They don't need to go and do all that stuff to make sure they get their contracts because they already got paid. But this team knows that they are basically in do or die. 4 losses already on the season is way too many for a team like the Cowboys, especially when the NFC is better than we all expected. They're significantly behind the Commanders and the Eagles. The NFC North is phenomenal. You got the Falcons and the Buccaneers who should be competing over in the NFC South. And oh yeah, every team in the NFC West is 500 or 3-4 in the case of the Rams, but very possibly could go to 4-4 this week. And so with the NFC being so good, 3-4 is not good enough for the Cowboys. I think they're going to come out on the road hungry and pull off a win in this game where the Falcons might think it's going to be a little easier than it will be. Up next, we have an NFC divisional matchup. We got the Washington Commanders visiting the New York Giants. And we've talked about both these teams. I mean, we've talked about every team a fair bit this season, but the Commanders are a significantly improved unit over what they were last year. Their offense looks very, very good. Their defense, while not being great, has been better than expected. And I also think the Giants have been better than expected. Now, to be clear, that does not mean the Giants are good. And the difference in terms of expectations to performance is very different. The Giants are like expectation, performance. The Commanders are expectation, performance. It's a different level. And so even though they're on the road, the Commanders are going to win this game. Jaden Daniels alone should be able to do everything he needs to put up points on the Giants. When they played earlier this season in Washington, it was a close game When they played earlier this season in Washington, it was a closer game. The Commanders won by scoring 7 field goals compared to 3 touchdowns for the Giants, but the Giants didn't convert any of their conversions, and so the Commanders won 21-18. But that was still very early in the Jaden Daniels tenure. I think he's figured it out. I think the offense is doing significantly better. You got a guy like Terry McLaurin, who is much improved since the start of the season. And so even though they're on the road against a team that they had a very close matchup with last time at home, they're still going to win. Next up, we have a matchup of NFC opponents who actually have this game as really meaningful. The Chicago Bears are in dead last in the NFC North at 4-3. And again, 4-3 is not a bad record, but that is sitting well outside the playoffs, and when you're in one of the toughest divisions in football and you're going to have 2 games against every one of those teams throughout the season, you need wins when you can get them. On the flip side, the Arizona Cardinals are literally leading the NFC West at 4-4, which is crazy given the fact that that's literally a worse record than the Chicago Bears, but they also need the wins because that division is so tight. While they are leading it at 4-4, the Seahawks and the 49ers are also at 4-4, and the Rams are barely behind at 3-4. And just one more game and one more win, and they would have the exact same record. They've just already had their bye. And with the NFC North being so good, with the Vikings and Packers both housing wildcard spots right now, along with the Philadelphia Eagles with a really good record at 5-2, and the Detroit Lions leading the NFC North at 6-1, these 2 teams need to start winning football games because the Bears, basically their only path to the football playoffs at this point in time is the wildcard spot. And they need wins to get there, and badly. And the Cardinals, their only path is winning the division. And while they are leading it, 1 loss and they're almost definitely not leading the division anymore. And so both these teams, it almost feels like an early season must win to put themselves in good, reasonable position to make the NFL playoffs come the end of the season. And the Cardinals are favored in this game primarily because they're at home. They've looked a little bit better, especially in recent weeks, and beating the Miami Dolphins last week. They've won 2 in a row on last-second field goals, but I'm picking the Chicago Bears. The Bears barely lost that game, and yes, that was a little bit of a pun intended, but it's also sad for them. I mean, literally a Hail Mary goes the other way, and the Bears are 5-2, equal record to the Minnesota Vikings and the Philadelphia Eagles, who are in the 2nd and 3rd wildcard spots at the moment for the NFC. I think Caleb Williams has shown that he is a pretty good quarterback in spite his terrible play last week against the Commanders, and I think they'll figure it out against a Cardinals team whose defense is not that great, and I think their defense will be able to hold Kyler Murray in check. I understand why the Cardinals are favored. It's probably because they're at home, but I'm going to take the talent of the Bears over the Cardinals, as much as I hate to do it, because anyone who's been watching my videos knows I predicted the Cardinals to be fairly good and surprising this year, and I always hate the Bears. So I'm going against my gut instinct, but that's just what we're going with this week. Next up, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars visiting the Philadelphia Eagles. And, I mean, come on. I'm not even going to try to stay this for any longer than it needs to. The Eagles are winning this football game. The Eagles have been hit or miss on the season, but they still have a 5-2 record. Saquon Barkley is still phenomenal and has been phenomenal every which week. The big questions about the Eagles are their defense and their passing attack. On the flip side, though, the Jaguars' big question is, everything. Brian Thomas Jr., good chance he's missing this game. Christian Kirk is out for the season. Yeah, they have Evan Engram back, but Travis Etienne might not be dressing. He might, but we don't even know what that's going to be. And Tank Bigsby has not been taking the passing work. I don't know who the receiving options outside of Engram are for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Their defense isn't that great. Their running game is mediocre, but if they're down in a football game, they can't really use the running game that much. And the Eagles, if they're up in a football game, would love to just hand it off to Saquon Barkley 30 times and call it a game and run it in from the 1-yard line with Jalen Hurts. And so this game absolutely lends itself to exactly what the Eagles want and exactly what the Jaguars don't want. And so Eagles are winning this game. Let's move on. Next up, we have an NFC West showdown with the LA Rams visiting the Seattle Seahawks, and another game that feels super important for this point in time in the season. With these two teams being literally within half a game of each other and of the last place and first place in the division, this matters a lot. The Rams are starting to get fully healthy. They got Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua back this past week, and they managed to beat the 5-1 Minnesota Vikings on Thursday Night Football. That also means that the LA Rams got a mini bye week coming into this week because they played on Thursday, meaning they have a 10-day rest coming to this game. The Seahawks, on the other hand, they should be getting DK Metcalf back, but that's not totally known yet. But last week, they got absolutely decimated by the Buffalo Bills. I mean, the Bills destroyed them in every facet of the game, and they also don't have a mini bye, which the LA Rams do. And so while the Seahawks are at home, the Rams have gotten a lot of guys back. They're going to get a mini bye. The Seahawks are a little bit more banged up at this point in time in the season, and so even with them being at home, I'm taking the Rams to win this game, moving to 4-4, the Seahawks falling to 4-5, and the NFC West is just absolutely nuts. This division just seems like it could go any which way until, the 49ers figure it out, get Christian McCaffrey back, and just go on a run and win this division like they seem to every year. And our final non-primetime game is another divisional matchup, this time a matchup of the NFC North, the Detroit Lions visiting the Green Bay Packers. This should be one of, if not the best games of the week. I personally think it's the best game of the week because I'm a Lions fan, but I'll acknowledge some people might think some other games are a little bit better. But this one's going to be crazy. This game is in Lambeau Field. It's in Green Bay, which matters because Green Bay plays on grass, not on turf, like what the Detroit Lions play on. This is pretty impactful because the Lions, sometimes they do really well at Lambeau Field, like they did last year where they absolutely blew the Packers out of the building. But sometimes that field comes back to fuck with them, and the Detroit Lions have a lot of trouble against the Green Bay Packers in Green Bay, slipping and sliding all over the place on that grass. This game also matters a lot, because even though the Lions are 6-1, if they lose this football game, they move to 6-2. The Packers move to 7-2, and the Packers would hold the head-to-head right now, which means they would have basically a full game on the Detroit Lions in terms of where they stand in the divisional rankings. That is massive how much this one game can turn it. On the flip side, if the Lions win, they move to 7-1, the Packers move to 6-3, and the Lions hold the game advantage, the head-to-head advantage against the Packers, and the remaining game against each other will be in Detroit. A massive boon for the Lions, who should be advantaged in that football game. The big impact of this game is going to be what is the case with Jordan Love. Jordan Love got injured and missed the second half of the game last week. And yes, the Packers still were able to beat the Jacksonville Jaguars. But I mean, come on, it's the Jacksonville Jaguars. While Malik Willis has won both of his games that he started and won the game he played a significant amount of time in, that is not saying a lot about Malik Willis, as none of those were very difficult games. And so if Malik Willis plays, it's got to be advantage Lions. On the flip side, if Jordan Love plays and he's healthy, I think at home I would give advantage to the Packers. But the big issue is, how healthy will Jordan Love be? He actually played for a little bit of time last week against the Jaguars when he was hurting, and he did not look very good. And so given I think that Jordan Love is not going to be 100% come Sunday, I'm going to give this one to the Lions. And yes, I acknowledge there's a little bit of homerism in that too, but I think the Lions are favored in this game by most people. Vegas has put them as their favorite, and I mean, the NFL panel of 10 that I always watch leading into these games, literally 10 for 10 picked the Lions to win. So I don't think it's that crazy to pick the Lions in this game, but I might go Packers if it wasn't for the Jordan Love injury. Moving on to Sunday Night Football, we got the Indianapolis Colts visiting the Minnesota Vikings, and I still remember when these two teams met a couple of years ago. I think it was the Indianapolis Colts were up like 33-0 at halftime, and the Vikings won that football game, like the greatest comeback in the history of the NFL. Still crazy. I remember I was at my dad's for Christmas, and that game was going on. We were like, it was Christmas Eve, we were opening presents, and we saw what the score was, and we were like, this doesn't matter. And then we came back up to the TV and the Vikings had won and we had no idea what the hell happened. It was crazy, just absolutely insane. And so while I hope we get a similar matchup this year, come on, we're never going to get that good a game again. But I'm still hopeful this could be a decent Sunday Night Football game. And it's especially going to be a decent Sunday Night Football game because Joe Flacco is starting for the Colts. Hallelujah. If Anthony Richardson was starting for the Colts, I think I already would have shown you that the Vikings were winning this game and moved on. And I'm not going to lie, I still have the Vikings winning this game. But this should be a much closer contest. I just think the Vikings are really good. They're at home. They've lost 2 in a row. They have the mini bye coming off the Thursday Night Football game. And so I think the Vikings have everything they need to pull off a win in this contest. But the Indianapolis Colts with Joe Flacco should put up a fight. I expect this to be a fairly high-scoring Sunday Night Football game, which, hallelujah, I love that. I love streaming high-scoring games because it's just more fun to watch. And so I have the Vikings win, but I also have a hit in the over. And our final game of Week 9 of the NFL season, we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers visiting the Kansas City Chiefs. And I'm just going to tell you right now, I got the Chiefs winning this game, going to 8-0. Who's surprised? Absolutely no one. Vegas literally has this game as their lock of the week. And I understand why. While the Tampa Bay Buccaneers looked very good for a significant portion of this season, they don't have Chris Godwin. They don't have Mike Evans. And so their receiving options are like Jalen McMillan and Cade Otton. I'm not saying those guys are bad, but I'm also not saying they're good, and they're definitely not as good as Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. On the flip side, the Kansas City Chiefs have a really, really good defense that is able to shut down pretty much everybody they go against, and their offense just does enough to win football games. Yeah, Patrick Mahomes hasn't looked that great, but I also somewhat question if that's just because he doesn't need to look great. Again, come the playoffs last year, Patrick Mahomes just turned it to 11 and started playing like the Patrick Mahomes we all knew, even though the second half of the season of 2023, he didn't look very good at all. I think the same thing can be said for this iteration of the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, where if the Chiefs are down or in really close games, all of a sudden, he's going to turn it up. But he just doesn't need to right now, and so is not. And so I just don't see how the Chiefs don't win this game. I think it's going to be close because the Chiefs just can't dominate anybody seemingly, but they're still going to get the win and move to 8-0. And so here you go. Here's a look at my picks summarized for the week. Compared to Vegas's pick, you can see some pretty significant differences. I have the Texans beating the Jets. I mean, I don't know how they have the Jets favored, but they do. Hey, fine. That's their choice, I guess. I have the Patriots beating the Titans. I have the Browns beating the Chargers, the Cowboys beating the Falcons, and finally, the Bears beating the Cardinals. So 5 upsets this week. I'm hoping that's enough to catch up to Vegas, who is 3 games ahead of me. Here's hoping. I got to get 4 or 5 right to be able to catch up with Vegas. Is that likely? Probably not. Is that possible? I sure as hell think so. And hopefully that is the case when you come back for this video in Week 10. Either way, I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, remember to leave a like and comment down below. Help us out, help us grow. I'll see you all next time. Peace!